Sarah Chun thought she knew everything about digital security. As a cybersecurity analyst for a major tech company, she had seen every type of online threat imaginable. But nothing prepared her for the moment when a complete stranger's warning would save her life and transform her into one of the most sought-after experts in counter-surveillance. This is the true story of how a simple message about a signal led to uncovering an international conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government and corporate power. Sarah Chun stared at her computer screen, the blue glow casting shadows across her tired face. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday in downtown Seattle, and the office building around her had emptied hours ago. Only the hum of servers and the occasional ping of security alerts broke the silence. She had been tracking unusual network activity for the past 3 weeks, patterns that didn't match any known cyber attack signatures in their database. The patterns were subtle, too subtle for most security systems to detect. Small data packets moving at irregular intervals, always during off-peak hours, always through different routes. Most analysts would have dismissed them as normal network noise, but Sarah had developed an eye for anomalies during her 5 years at Meridian Technologies. Something about these signals felt deliberate, purposeful. She rubbed her eyes and reached for her coffee cup, finding it empty again. This was her 4th late night this week, and her supervisor had already hinted that she might be chasing ghosts. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was onto something significant. The data patterns reminded her of techniques she had studied in graduate school, methods used by advanced persistent threat groups to establish covert communication channels. Her phone buzzed with a text message. Sarah glanced at it, expecting another message from her roommate asking when she would be home. Instead, she saw a number she didn't recognize. The signals you're tracking aren't random. Check your personal devices. You're being watched. Sarah's blood went cold. She stared at the message, reading it 3 times to make sure she wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. How could someone know what she was working on? Her research was classified, accessible only to a handful of people within the company. She looked around the empty office, suddenly aware of every shadow and sound. Her first instinct was to delete the message and dismiss it as a prank or spam. But something made her hesitate. The timing was too perfect, too specific. Whoever sent this knew exactly what she was doing, exactly when she was doing it. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her personal laptop and began running diagnostic scans. What she found made her stomach drop. Hidden processes were running in the background, tiny programs that shouldn't exist. Her webcam had been accessed 17 times in the past month, always during hours when she was working late. Her location data was being transmitted to an unknown server every 6 hours. Sarah's mind raced as the implications hit her. Someone had been monitoring her personal devices, tracking her movements, watching her work. But who and why? She grabbed her phone and typed a response to the unknown number. Who are you? How do you know about this? The reply came within seconds. Someone who escaped. Meet me tomorrow at Pike Place Market, noon, by the fish vendors. Come alone. Bring your research. Sarah's hands shook as she read the message. Every instinct told her this could be a trap, a setup by whoever was already watching her. But the alternative was worse. If she ignored this warning, if she continued working alone, she might disappear like so many other analysts who had stumbled onto things they weren't supposed to find. She spent the rest of the night documenting everything she had discovered, copying files to encrypted drives, preparing evidence packages. As dawn broke over Seattle's skyline, Sarah made a decision that would change her life forever. She would go to the meeting. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. She took a circuitous route to Pike Place Market, switching buses 3 times and walking through crowded shopping centers to make sure she wasn't being followed. The paranoia felt surreal, like something out of a spy movie, but the evidence on her personal devices was undeniable. Pike Place Market buzzed with its usual energy. Tourists snapped photos of flying fish, vendors called out prices for fresh seafood, and the air filled with the mingled scents of coffee and ocean breeze. Sarah positioned herself near the fish vendors, trying to look casual while scanning the crowd for anyone who might be her mysterious contact. At exactly noon, a woman approached her. She was in her 40s, with prematurely gray hair and eyes that constantly moved, assessing threats. She wore a simple jacket and jeans, nothing that would draw attention, but something about her posture suggested military or law enforcement training. "You're Sarah," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "And you're the one who sent the message," Sarah replied. "My name is Elena Vasquez. I used to work for the NSA until I discovered something I wasn't supposed to see." Elena's voice was quiet but steady. "What you found isn't just corporate espionage. It's part of something much bigger." Elena led Sarah to a small coffee shop tucked away in the market's lower level. They found a corner table away from other customers, and Elena pulled out a tablet covered in privacy screens. 3 years ago, I was part of a joint task force investigating foreign interference in tech companies, Elena began. We thought we were tracking Chinese or Russian operatives trying to steal trade secrets. But the deeper we dug, the more we realized the signals were coming from inside our own government. Sarah felt her mouth go dry. "What do you mean?" "There's a program called ShadowNet. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's run by a joint task force between certain elements in the NSA, CIA, and several defense contractors. They've been placing surveillance software on the personal devices of tech workers, monitoring their research, identifying valuable intelligence." Elena swiped through documents on her tablet, showing Sarah classified memos and technical specifications. The evidence was overwhelming. ShadowNet had been operating for at least 5 years, targeting employees at major technology companies across the country. "But why target people like me?" Sarah asked. "I'm just a security analyst." "Because people like you see patterns that others miss. You have access to sensitive systems. And sometimes you discover things that certain people would prefer stayed hidden." Elena leaned forward. "The signals you've been tracking aren't from foreign adversaries. They're from ShadowNet operatives communicating with embedded assets inside your company." Sarah's mind reeled as the pieces fell into place. The unusual data patterns she had been investigating weren't evidence of an external attack. They were evidence of internal coordination, a network of operatives working from within Meridian Technologies itself. "How many people are involved?" Sarah whispered. "We estimate at least 50 operatives across a dozen major tech companies. They're not just stealing information. They're influencing research directions, sabotaging competing projects, and eliminating threats to their agenda." Elena showed Sarah a list of names, people who had discovered evidence of ShadowNet's activities over the past 3 years. Next to each name was a status update. Some had been discredited professionally. Others had suffered mysterious accidents. A few had simply disappeared. "What happened to them?" Sarah asked, though she feared the answer. "The lucky ones were just destroyed professionally. Fabricated evidence of misconduct, false accusations, destroyed reputations. The unlucky ones." Elena's voice trailed off. "Let's just say ShadowNet has resources beyond what most people can imagine." Sarah stared at the list, recognizing several names. Dr. Michael Chun, a researcher who had supposedly committed suicide after being accused of selling secrets to foreign governments. Lisa Rodriguez, a software engineer who had died in a car accident just days after filing a report about unusual network activity at her company. People she had heard about in industry news, dismissed as cautionary tales about the pressures of working in high-tech security. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked. "Why risk exposing yourself?" Elena's expression hardened. "Because I'm tired of running. I've been hiding for 3 years, watching good people get destroyed while I stayed silent. But you're different. You've already seen through their methods. You've documented evidence they can't easily discredit. And you have something I never had." "What's that?" "The technical skills to build a countersignal. A way to turn their own surveillance network against them." Elena explained that ShadowNet's greatest strength was also its weakness. The network relied on coordinated communication between operatives, all using similar encryption protocols and routing methods. If someone could decode their signal patterns, it would be possible to identify every member of the network, track their activities, and gather evidence of their crimes. The signal you warned me about, Sarah said. You know how to create a counter signal. I know the theory, but I'm not a programmer. I'm not a network analyst. I don't have the technical skills to actually build it. Elena met Sarah's eyes. But you do. Over the next hour, Elena outlined what she knew about ShadowNet's communication protocols. The network used a sophisticated system of steganography, hiding encrypted messages inside seemingly innocent data transfers. Image files, software updates, even routine system logs contained hidden communications between operatives. Sarah's analytical mind began working through the possibilities. If she could identify the specific patterns Elena described, she could potentially reverse engineer the encryption keys. And if she had the encryption keys, she could monitor ShadowNet's communications in real time. This is incredibly dangerous, Sarah said. If they discover what we're doing, they'll kill us, Elena finished matter-of-factly. But if we do nothing, they'll eventually identify you as a threat anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to expose them before they can silence us. Sarah thought about the list of names Elena had shown her, all the researchers and analysts who had stumbled onto fragments of the truth. She thought about the surveillance software on her personal devices, the feeling of being watched, the growing certainty that her normal life was already over. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Elena smiled for the first time since they had met. "I need you to disappear. Not permanently, but long enough to build our counter-signal without ShadowNet monitoring your progress. I have a safe house, completely isolated from any networks they might be monitoring. We'll have maybe 2 weeks before they realize you're missing and start looking seriously." Sarah felt a chill of fear and excitement. Everything in her life up to this moment had been predictable, safe, ordinary. But Elena was offering her a chance to be part of something significant, to fight back against people who had been manipulating and destroying lives with impunity. "How do I know I can trust you?" Sarah asked. Elena pulled out her phone and showed Sarah an encrypted folder filled with documents. Personnel files, budget reports, operational memos, all bearing the ShadowNet classification. The evidence was extensive and detailed, far beyond what any single person could fabricate. "Because I'm giving you everything I have," Elena said. "If you betray me, I'm dead. If you walk away, I'm dead. My only chance of survival is if we succeed together." Sarah looked around the coffee shop at the normal people living their normal lives, unaware that a shadow network of operatives was manipulating the technology that governed their daily existence. She thought about her comfortable job, her predictable routine, her quiet life that was apparently built on an illusion of security. "When do we start?" she asked. Elena stood up, gathering her tablet and preparing to leave. "Pack light. Bring only essential personal items and your technical equipment. Meet me tonight at midnight behind the Fremont Troll. We'll drive to the safe house from there." As Elena walked away, Sarah remained seated, processing the magnitude of what she had just agreed to do. In the span of one conversation, she had gone from being a security analyst investigating unusual network patterns to becoming a fugitive planning to expose a covert government operation. She finished her coffee and walked back through Pike Place Market, seeing everything with new eyes. The tourists taking photos, the vendors calling out prices, the security cameras mounted on every corner. How many of those cameras were part of ShadowNet's surveillance network? How many seemingly innocent bystanders were actually operatives monitoring her movements? That evening, Sarah packed a single backpack with clothes, personal items, and her most important technical equipment. She left her apartment looking exactly as it always did, not wanting to signal that she was leaving for an extended period. As she walked toward the Fremont neighborhood, she felt like she was crossing a bridge that she could never cross back. The Fremont Troll loomed above her in the darkness, a massive concrete sculpture emerging from beneath the bridge. Sarah waited in the shadows, checking her watch every few minutes. At exactly midnight, headlights swept across the area, and Elena's car pulled up to the curb. "Ready?" Elena asked as Sarah climbed into the passenger seat. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure she would ever be ready for what they were about to do. As Elena drove through the empty Seattle streets, Sarah looked back at the city lights growing smaller in the distance. She was leaving behind everything familiar, everything safe, to pursue a truth that could either save lives or get them both killed. The safe house was a cabin in the Cascade Mountains, 3 hours east of Seattle. Elena had rented it under a false identity, paying cash for 6 months in advance. It had no internet connection, no landline telephone, no electronic devices that could be remotely monitored. For the next 2 weeks, it would be their laboratory, their fortress, and potentially their tomb. As they carried equipment into the cabin by flashlight, Elena outlined their plan. Sarah would analyze the signal pattern she had discovered, using Elena's intelligence to decode ShadowNet's communication protocols. Once they understood how the network operated, they would build a counter-signal system capable of monitoring all ShadowNet communications in real time. And then, Sarah asked as they set up workstations in the cabin's main room. Then, we document everything. Every operative, every operation, every crime they've committed. We gather enough evidence to expose them publicly and legally. And if they find us first, Elena checked the locks on all the doors and windows before answering. Then, we better hope our counter-signal is good enough to give us advance warning. As dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah began the most important work of her life. She had 2 weeks to build a weapon capable of destroying one of the most sophisticated surveillance networks in the world. The signal Elena had warned her about was just the beginning. Now it was time to send a signal of their own. Sarah's fingers moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, her eyes burning from 12 hours of continuous coding. The cabin's main room had been transformed into a high-tech laboratory, with multiple laptops, signal analyzers, and custom hardware scattered across every available surface. Elena sat nearby, studying classified documents while monitoring police scanner frequencies for any sign that ShadowNet had traced their location. 3 days into their isolation, Sarah had made her first breakthrough. The signal patterns she had discovered at Meridian Technologies weren't random noise as she had initially suspected. They were part of an elegant but complex communication system that used quantum encryption principles to hide messages in plain sight. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a series of waveforms on her screen. ShadowNet isn't just using steganography to hide messages in normal data transfers. They're using quantum entanglement to create unbreakable encryption keys that change every few seconds. Elena looked up from her documents, her expression skeptical. Quantum encryption is theoretical technology. The NSA doesn't have operational quantum computers. They don't need full quantum computers, Sarah explained, her excitement growing as she understood the implications of her discovery. They're using quantum random number generators to create encryption keys that are mathematically unpredictable. Each operative has a device that generates the same quantum random sequence, but only if they know the initial seed values. Sarah showed Elena how ShadowNet's system worked. Each operative carried a small device disguised as a normal USB drive or phone accessory. These devices contained quantum random number generators that could create identical encryption keys when synchronized with specific quantum signatures. The beauty of the system was its simplicity. Even if someone intercepted ShadowNet communications, they couldn't decode them without access to the quantum signature that generated the encryption keys. "But you found a way to break it," Elena said. It wasn't a question. She had learned to recognize the look on Sarah's face when she solved complex technical problems. "Not exactly break it," Sarah corrected. "But I found a weakness. Quantum random number generators aren't truly random. They're based on quantum fluctuations that follow predictable patterns over long periods. If I can analyze enough signal samples, I can predict the quantum signatures they're using." Over the next 4 days, Sarah worked with an intensity that worried Elena. She slept only when exhaustion forced her to collapse, ate only when Elena physically put food in front of her, and spoke only to explain technical details or ask for more classified documents. Elena began to understand why Sarah had been targeted by ShadowNet. Her ability to see patterns in complex systems was extraordinary, almost supernatural. By the end of their first week at the cabin, Sarah had built a working prototype of their counter-signal system. The device looked like a normal laptop computer, but inside it contained custom hardware capable of intercepting and analyzing quantum-encrypted communications in real time. When Sarah first powered it on and connected it to a directional antenna, the results exceeded their most optimistic expectations. "We're receiving 17 different ShadowNet communication channels," Sarah announced, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're operating all across the Pacific Northwest. Look at this traffic volume. There are dozens of operatives coordinate their activities every few hours." Elena moved behind Sarah's chair, staring at the decoded messages scrolling across the screen. Most were routine operational updates, but some contained information that made her blood run cold. Asset 47 reports target has been neutralized. Cleanup team deployed to eliminate evidence. Priority directive: locate and silence Chun before she can complete countersignal research. Meridian Technologies infiltration proceeding on schedule. Executive-level assets now in position. "Sarah," Elena said quietly, "they're looking for you specifically, and they know about the countersignal." Sarah stopped typing and read the messages Elena was pointing to. ShadowNet had discovered her disappearance 3 days earlier and was conducting an active search. Worse, they seemed to know about Elena's involvement and the general nature of their research. "How could they know?" Sarah asked. "We've been completely isolated. No internet, no phone calls, no electronic communications of any kind." Elena studied the intercepted messages more carefully, looking for clues about ShadowNet's information sources. What she found made her stomach drop. "Look at the timestamps," Elena said. "These messages about our countersignal research were sent before we even met. They knew about our plan before we made it." Sarah felt the room spinning as the implications hit her. "That's impossible. Unless someone has been monitoring us from the beginning," Elena finished. "Someone who knew about my contacts with you before I sent that first warning message." They spent the next hour analyzing the intercepted communications, trying to understand how ShadowNet had obtained advanced knowledge of their plans. The answer, when they found it, was both brilliant and terrifying. ShadowNet hadn't been monitoring their communications because they hadn't made any electronic communications to monitor. Instead, ShadowNet had been using predictive modeling to anticipate their actions. By analyzing Elena's psychological profile and Sarah's technical capabilities, they had calculated the probability of their collaboration and planned countermeasures accordingly. "They're not just spying on people," Sarah realized. "They're predicting human behavior with mathematical precision. Look at these algorithm outputs. They knew I would discover the signals at Meridian Technologies. They knew you would contact me. They knew we would try to build a counter-signal system." Elena stared at the evidence in growing horror. "If they can predict our actions, then they know we're here. They know about the cabin." As if summoned by her words, the quantum random number generators in Sarah's countersignal device began detecting multiple new communication channels, all focused on their geographic area. Sarah quickly decoded the messages, her hands shaking as she read them. "Surveillance teams Alpha and Beta in position around target location. Subjects confirmed inside structure. Await orders for final approach. Authorization received. Commence operation at 0300 hours. No survivors." Sarah looked at her watch. It was 2:47 a.m. 13 minutes, she said. "They're going to attack in 13 minutes. Elena was already moving, grabbing essential equipment and documents while scanning the cabin for defensive positions. "Is the counter-signal system portable? Can we take it with us?" Sarah looked at the complex array of hardware she had spent a week assembling. Moving it would take at least 30 minutes, and they had less than 13. But without the counter-signal system, they had no way to monitor ShadowNet's operations or gather additional evidence. "I can't move all of it," Sarah said, "but I can download everything to encrypted drives and rebuild it later if we survive." While Sarah frantically copied data files and encryption algorithms to portable storage devices, Elena prepared their escape route. The cabin had a back door that led into dense forest, But Elena knew that ShadowNet surveillance teams would have positioned snipers to cover all possible exit points. How many people are out there? Sarah asked as she packed her laptops and hard drives. Elena decoded more intercepted messages, building a picture of ShadowNet's assault plan. At least 12 operatives, 3 sniper teams for assault specialists, and a cleanup crew to eliminate evidence after they kill us. Sarah felt paralyzing fear wash over her. She was a computer analyst, not a soldier. Elena had military training, but they were outnumbered 6-1 by professional killers with unlimited resources and government backing. There's another option, Elena said suddenly. We don't have to run. We can fight back. Fight back? Against 12 trained operatives? With what weapons? Elena smiled grimly and pulled out a device Sarah hadn't seen before. It looked like a small tablet computer, but when Elena powered it on, Sarah realized it was something much more sophisticated. This is a military-grade electronic warfare unit, Elena explained. I borrowed it from the NSA before I went into hiding. It can jam communications, disrupt electronic devices, and create false GPS signatures. If we can't outrun them, maybe we can confuse them long enough to escape. Sarah stared at the device, her analytical mind already working through possibilities. What if we do more than just confuse them? What if we turn their own surveillance network against them? Elena looked puzzled. What do you mean? Sarah's excitement grew as she explained her idea. ShadowNet's strength is their communication network. They coordinate through quantum-encrypted channels that they believe are secure. But our counter-signal system can't just intercept their communications. It can inject false messages into their network. You want to hack their communication system? During an active assault, I want to do more than hack it. I want to take control of it. Sarah connected her counter-signal device to Elena's electronic warfare unit, creating a hybrid system with capabilities neither device possessed alone. If I can spoof their quantum encryption signatures, I can send orders that appear to come from ShadowNet Command. Elena understood immediately. We can send false orders, create confusion, turn their own coordination system against them. Exactly. But we need 7 minutes to establish full network penetration, and they're going to attack in. Sarah checked her watch. 9 minutes. Elena nodded grimly. I'll buy you the time you need. While Sarah worked to penetrate ShadowNet's communication network, Elena prepared defensive measures around the cabin. She disabled the interior lights and set up improvised early warning systems using motion detectors from their security equipment. Most importantly, she positioned Elena's electronic warfare device to create a localized communications jamming field that would disrupt ShadowNet's ability to coordinate their assault. At exactly 2:59 a.m., Sarah achieved full penetration of ShadowNet's communication network. She now had the ability to send orders that would appear to come from legitimate command authority. At 3 a.m., ShadowNet's assault teams began their approach. Elena watched through night vision equipment as dark figures moved through the forest surrounding the cabin. They advanced with military precision, communicating through hand signals and encrypted radio channels. But as they reached their final assault positions, Sarah began her counterattack. The first false order Sarah transmitted was simple: abort mission. Targets have been relocated. All teams returned to base immediately. Through her monitoring equipment, Sarah watched as ShadowNet's assault teams received the order and stopped their advance. But within 30 seconds, they received a contradictory message from actual ShadowNet command. Disregard previous order. Mission parameters unchanged. Commence assault as planned. They're not falling for simple false orders, Elena observed. Their command structure has authentication protocols. Sarah nodded, already adapting her strategy. Then, we'll give them orders they can't ignore. Instead of sending false retreat orders, Sarah began injecting chaos into ShadowNet's communication network. She sent each assault team different target coordinates, created fake reports of police presence in the area, and generated false intelligence suggesting that their cover had been blown. The effect was immediate and dramatic. ShadowNet's carefully coordinated assault began to fall apart as teams received conflicting information and contradictory orders. Sniper teams reported seeing targets in locations where assault teams were supposed to be positioned. Assault teams received warnings about police vehicles that didn't exist. Command staff became increasingly frustrated as their communication system appeared to malfunction at the worst possible moment. Surveillance Team Alpha, report your position. Alpha Team positioned at coordinates Charlie 7. No visual on targets. Impossible. Command shows you at coordinates Bravo 4. Negative command. GPS confirms Charlie 7. All teams hold position pending coordinate verification. Sarah smiled as she listened to the growing confusion in ShadowNet's communications. By manipulating their GPS data and communication routing, she had made it impossible for them to determine each other's actual positions. But she wasn't finished. The next phase of her counterattack was more sophisticated. Sarah began impersonating specific ShadowNet operatives, sending personal messages that created suspicion and paranoia within their ranks. Alpha Leader to Command. Bravo Team is not responding to direct communications. Suspect they may be compromised. Command to Bravo Leader. Alpha Team reports you're not responding. Confirm your status immediately. Bravo Leader to Command. Alpha Team has not attempted contact. Suspect Alpha Leader may be under duress. Elena watched in amazement as Sarah single-handedly turned ShadowNet's assault force against itself. Within 10 minutes, the 12 operatives surrounding their cabin were more concerned about threats from each other than about capturing their actual targets. But Sarah's masterpiece came when she discovered something unexpected in ShadowNet's communication protocols. The network wasn't just used for operational coordination. It also contained automated systems for reporting mission success to higher-level command authorities. Elena, Sarah said excitedly, I can access their mission reporting system. I can tell ShadowNet Command that we're already dead. Elena understood the implications immediately. If their command believes the mission is complete, they'll call off any backup teams and close the operation. Sarah quickly crafted a mission completion report that would convince ShadowNet Command that their assault had been successful. But instead of simply reporting their deaths, she decided to take a calculated risk that could give them a significant advantage. The report Sarah transmitted stated that both targets had been eliminated, but that significant intelligence had been discovered during the assault. According to the fake report, Sarah and Elena had been working with a larger network of analysts and former intelligence operatives, all working to expose ShadowNet's activities. Targets neutralized as ordered, the report read. However, subjects had established extensive communications with unknown accomplices. Recommend immediate investigation of all contacts and associates to prevent intelligence leaks. Elena looked worried as she read the fake report. You're making them think we were part of a bigger conspiracy. Won't that make them search harder for our accomplices? That's exactly what I want them to do, Sarah explained. If they believe we were part of a larger network, they'll waste time and resources investigating people who don't exist. Meanwhile, the real investigation will be conducted by us, using their own communication system to monitor their activities. The psychological effect of Sarah's deception was immediate. ShadowNet's assault teams received orders to withdraw and begin investigating potential accomplice networks. Their command staff began analyzing Sarah's and Elena's backgrounds, looking for evidence of a larger conspiracy that didn't exist. Most importantly, they stopped looking for Sarah and Elena. As far as ShadowNet was concerned, their primary threats had been eliminated. Elena and Sarah waited until dawn before emerging from the cabin. The forest around them was empty except for the normal sounds of wildlife waking up. ShadowNet's assault teams had withdrawn, believing their mission was complete. What do we do now? Elena asked as they packed their remaining equipment. Sarah looked at her counter-signal device, still connected to ShadowNet's communication network. They now had unprecedented access to one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in the world. They could monitor every message, track every operative, and document every crime. Now we become ghosts, Sarah said. We're officially dead, which means we can operate without ShadowNet watching us. We'll use their own network to gather evidence and identify every person involved in their operations. Elena smiled for the first time in days. And then we expose them all. But this time, we'll have the evidence to destroy them completely. As they drove away from the cabin, Sarah realized that the warning Elena had sent her about the signal had been more prophetic than either of them had understood. She had indeed responded with the exact counter. But the real battle was just beginning. 2 weeks after their escape from the cabin, Sarah Chun sat in a nondescript internet cafe in Portland, Oregon, her appearance dramatically altered by a professional disguise Elena had arranged. Her natural black hair was now blonde, her usual glasses replaced by colored contacts, and subtle prosthetics changed the shape of her nose and jawline. To any observer, she looked like a freelance web designer working on client projects. In reality, she was conducting the most sophisticated intelligence operation of her life. The counter-signal system she had built was now distributed across multiple devices, allowing her to monitor ShadowNet communications from any location with internet access. Over the past 14 days, she had documented evidence of crimes that staggered her. ShadowNet wasn't just conducting surveillance on technology workers. They were manipulating stock markets, influencing government policy, and systematically eliminating anyone who threatened their operations. Elena entered the cafe and sat at a table across the room, appearing to read a magazine while actually serving as Sarah's security monitor. They had developed elaborate protocols for their meetings, never arriving together, never acknowledging each other directly, always maintaining the fiction that they were strangers who happened to be in the same location. Sarah's laptop screen showed a real-time map of ShadowNet operative positions across the Pacific Northwest. Red dots represented confirmed agents, yellow dots indicated suspected collaborators, and blue lines showed communication pathways between different cells. What had started as an investigation into unusual network patterns had evolved into mapping an entire shadow organization with hundreds of members. But today, Sarah had discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in the deepest layers of ShadowNet's communication protocols was evidence of their ultimate objective. They weren't just stealing technology or manipulating markets for profit. They were preparing for something called Final Protocol, an operation designed to eliminate democratic oversight of intelligence agencies entirely. Sarah's hands trembled as she decoded the latest batch of intercepted communications. Final Protocol was scheduled to begin in 6 weeks, timed to coincide with a major technology conference in San Francisco, where dozens of influential lawmakers and technology executives would gather in one location. Phase 1 deployment confirmed for Tech Summit event. One message read: all executive assets in position. Legislative targets identified and prioritized. Biological vector prepared for selective deployment. Sarah felt sick as she realized what she was reading. ShadowNet wasn't planning an assassination or bombing at the technology conference. They were planning to deploy some kind of biological weapon that could target specific individuals while leaving others unharmed. She quickly cross-referenced the message with other communications, building a picture of Final Protocol scope. The biological weapon was designed to target people with specific genetic markers, allowing ShadowNet to eliminate enemies while appearing to cause natural death from heart attacks or strokes. The technology was apparently based on advances in personalized medicine, using genetic profiling to create targeted biological agents. But the real horror of Final Protocol wasn't the weapon itself. It was the list of targets. Sarah found encrypted files containing genetic profiles and assassination priorities for over 300 people. Senators who had proposed oversight legislation for intelligence agencies. Technology executives who had refused to cooperate with surveillance programs. Journalists who had investigated government overreach. Scientists who had developed encryption technologies that threatened surveillance capabilities. Elena noticed Sarah's distressed expression and casually moved to a table closer to her position. Using a prearranged signal, Sarah indicated that she had discovered urgent intelligence that required immediate consultation. They left the cafe separately, meeting 20 minutes later in a parking garage 3 blocks away. "They're planning mass murder," Sarah said without preamble as soon as Elena joined her in their rented car. "Some kind of genetic weapon that can kill specific people while making their deaths look natural." Elena's face went pale as Sarah explained what she had discovered about Final Protocol. The implications went far beyond anything they had previously imagined. ShadowNet wasn't just a rogue intelligence operation. They were planning to reshape American democracy by systematically eliminating everyone who opposed unlimited surveillance power. "How many targets?" Elena asked. 317 confirmed profiles. But there are references to additional target categories that suggest the number could be much higher. Sarah showed Elena the encrypted file she had intercepted. "Look at this priority ranking system. They're not just targeting obvious threats. They're targeting anyone with the intelligence and resources to expose them in the future." Elena studied the target list, recognizing names from across the political spectrum. Liberal senators who championed privacy rights were listed alongside conservative representatives who opposed government overreach. Technology entrepreneurs who built encryption software were prioritized equally with journalists who investigated intelligence agencies. This isn't about political ideology, Elena realized. They're targeting anyone who believes in constitutional limits on government power. Sarah nodded grimly. "And they have 6 weeks to stop them." Over the next 3 days, Sarah and Elena worked around the clock to understand Final Protocol's operational details. The biological weapon was apparently stored in a secure laboratory facility operated by a defense contractor called Biosecure Solutions. Sarah traced ShadowNet communications to identify the facility's location, hidden within a larger pharmaceutical research complex outside San Francisco. But accessing the facility would require more than just technical skills. Biosecure Solutions employed military-grade security, and the biological weapon was stored in underground laboratories that could only be accessed by authorized personnel with multiple layers of clearance. "We need help," Elena admitted after reviewing the facility's security specifications. "This is beyond what 2 people can accomplish alone." Sarah had been thinking the same thing, but she was reluctant to trust anyone else with knowledge of Final Protocol. Every new person they contacted increased the risk of exposure, and ShadowNet had demonstrated their ability to eliminate threats with surgical precision. "What about other people who have been targeted by ShadowNet?" Sarah suggested. "People who have their own reasons to want this organization destroyed." Elena consulted the list of ShadowNet targets, looking for individuals with both motivation and capability to assist their operation. Most of the names belonged to people who were already dead or discredited, but a few stood out as potential allies. Dr. Amanda Foster was a bioweapons expert who had been forced to resign from the CDC after refusing to cooperate with a classified research program. According to ShadowNet Communications, Dr. Foster had been marked for elimination, but had proven difficult to locate after going into hiding 18 months earlier. Marcus Webb was a former CIA operative who had been expelled from the agency after questioning the legality of domestic surveillance programs. ShadowNet had attempted to discredit him with fabricated evidence of misconduct, but Webb had successfully defended himself and was now working as an independent security consultant. Jennifer Liu was an investigative journalist who had published a series of articles exposing connections between intelligence agencies and defense contractors. ShadowNet had orchestrated a campaign to destroy her reputation, but she had continued investigating despite constant harassment and threats. 3 people, Sarah said, each with specialized skills we need, and each with personal reasons to want ShadowNet destroyed. Elena looked skeptical. "How do we contact them without exposing our investigation?" "ShadowNet monitors all electronic communications of their targets." Sarah smiled and pointed to her counter-signal device. "We don't contact them through normal channels. We contact them through ShadowNet's own communication network." Elena understood immediately. By using ShadowNet's communication protocols, Sarah could send messages that would appear to come from within the organization itself. If she was careful with the message content and timing, she could contact their potential allies while making it appear that ShadowNet operatives were attempting to recruit them as double agents. Sarah spent 2 days crafting messages that would convince Dr. Foster, Marcus Webb, and Jennifer Liu to meet with them, while maintaining the illusion that they were ShadowNet operatives offering information in exchange for cooperation. Each message was carefully designed to exploit specific knowledge and motivations that would make the recruitment attempt credible. To Dr. Foster, Sarah sent a message claiming to be a ShadowNet scientist who had discovered ethical problems with the biological weapons program and was seeking to expose it from within. To Marcus Webb, she sent a message appearing to come from a ShadowNet operative who wanted to defect and needed security expertise to safely extract classified information. To Jennifer Liu, she sent a message posing as a ShadowNet whistleblower with documentary evidence of the organization's crimes. All 3 responded within 24 hours, agreeing to meet at separate locations across the San Francisco Bay Area. Sarah and Elena realized they were about to cross another threshold in their investigation. They would no longer be operating alone, which increased their chances of success, but also multiplied the risks of exposure and betrayal. Dr. Amanda Foster was their first contact, meeting them at a small medical conference in Oakland where her presence would appear routine. Foster was in her 50s, with graying hair and the cautious demeanor of someone who had learned to distrust authority figures. When Sarah and Elena approached her during a conference break, Foster immediately recognized that they weren't the ShadowNet operatives they had claimed to be. "You're the analyst they think they killed," Foster said quietly. "I've been monitoring their communications since they forced me out of the CDC. I know about the fake mission reports and the search for your accomplices." Sarah felt a moment of panic, but Elena remained calm. "If you know who we are, then you know why we contacted you." Foster nodded slowly. "Final protocol. They want me to help them perfect the targeting mechanism for their biological weapon. I've been refusing, but they're getting more aggressive in their recruitment efforts." Over the next hour, Foster explained what she knew about Final Protocol's biological weapon. The technology was based on advances in gene therapy that allowed medical treatments to target specific genetic markers. ShadowNet had corrupted this research to create weapons that could cause heart attacks, strokes, or organ failures in people with targeted genetic profiles. "The weapon is elegant in its simplicity," Foster explained. "It appears to be a routine vaccination or medical treatment, but it contains engineered proteins that react with specific genetic sequences. For people without the targeted markers, it's completely harmless. For people with the targeted markers, it causes rapid cellular breakdown that mimics natural causes of death." Sarah felt sick as she understood the implications. How many people could they kill simultaneously? Hundreds, potentially thousands, depending on how they deploy it. The technology conference would be an ideal delivery mechanism. Everyone receives conference materials, promotional items, even complimentary refreshments. Any of those could be vectors for biological agents. Foster agreed to help them prevent Final Protocol, but she warned that stopping the biological weapon would require access to both the weapon samples and the targeting data. Without both components, they couldn't prove what ShadowNet was planning or develop countermeasures to protect potential victims. Their second contact was Marcus Webb, who met them at a security equipment trade show in San Jose. Webb was a compact man in his 40s with the alert eyes and controlled movements of a professional intelligence operative. Unlike Foster, Webb had immediately suspected that Sarah and Elena weren't genuine ShadowNet operatives. "Your communication protocols are impressive," Webb said after they found a private meeting space. "But your operational security has some obvious flaws. Real ShadowNet operatives would never meet in public locations like this." Elena bristled slightly at the criticism, but Webb was already offering solutions. "Lucky for you, I've been planning my own operation against ShadowNet for the past year. Your technical capabilities, combined with my operational experience, could actually make it work." Webb explained that he had been gathering intelligence on ShadowNet ever since they destroyed his CIA career. He had identified several of their key facilities and had developed plans for infiltrating their operations. Most importantly, he had contacts within the defense contractor community who could provide access to biosecure solutions. The facility where they're storing the biological weapon has vulnerabilities, Webb said, showing them architectural plans and security assessments. But exploiting those vulnerabilities requires precise timing and coordination that I couldn't achieve working alone. Sarah studied the facility plans, her analytical mind already working through possible infiltration scenarios. How long will we need inside the facility? Minimum 2 hours to locate the weapon samples and download targeting data. Ideally 4 hours to gather comprehensive evidence and ensure we have everything needed to expose the entire operation. Elena looked concerned. What are the risks if we're caught inside the facility? Webb's expression was grim. Immediate termination. Biosecure Solutions has authorization to use lethal force against intruders, and ShadowNet has already demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect Final Protocol. Their third contact was Jennifer Liu, who met them at a journalism conference in San Francisco. Liu was younger than Sarah had expected, probably in her early 30s, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had faced serious threats and survived. When they approached her during a conference networking event, Liu immediately led them to a secure meeting room she had reserved under false pretenses. I've been investigating ShadowNet for 3 years, Liu said without preamble. I know about their surveillance programs, their corporate infiltration networks, and their elimination protocols for targeted individuals. But I've never had direct access to their communications before. Sarah realized that Liu represented the missing piece of their operation. They had technical capability, operational expertise, and scientific knowledge, but they needed someone with the media connections and credibility to expose Final Protocol publicly once they gathered evidence. Liu explained that she had been building a comprehensive investigation into government surveillance overreach, but she had been missing the direct evidence needed to prove coordination between intelligence agencies and defense contractors. Sarah's intercepted ShadowNet communications provided exactly the documentation Liu needed to publish an expose that would be impossible to discredit or suppress. But publication has to be timed perfectly, Liu warned. If we release the story too early, they'll accelerate Final Protocol or change their methods. If we wait too long, hundreds of people will die before anyone can stop them. Over the next week, their improvised team developed a comprehensive plan to infiltrate Biosecure Solutions, gather evidence of Final Protocol, and expose ShadowNet publicly before they could deploy their biological weapon. The plan required precise coordination between all 4 team members, with no room for error or hesitation. Sarah would use her counter-signal system to monitor ShadowNet communications and provide real-time intelligence about security changes at the facility. Elena would coordinate overall operations and serve as their primary communication link. Webb would lead the physical infiltration of Biosecure Solutions. Foster would analyze any biological samples they recovered and provide scientific validation of their evidence. Liu would prepare publication of their findings and coordinate with media outlets to ensure maximum impact. But as they finalized their plans, Sarah discovered new intelligence that complicated everything. Final Protocol wasn't just targeting the technology conference in San Francisco. ShadowNet was planning coordinated attacks across multiple cities, using different delivery methods to eliminate targets who wouldn't be attending the conference. Look at these logistics communications, Sarah said, showing the team encrypted messages she had intercepted. They're planning simultaneous operations in Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. The technology conference is just one part of a much larger operation. Elena studied the new intelligence, her expression growing increasingly concerned. How many total targets are they planning to eliminate? Sarah cross-referenced the communications with ShadowNet's target databases, building a comprehensive picture of Final Protocol scope. What she found exceeded their worst fears. Over 1,500 people across 5 cities, Sarah announced. They're planning to eliminate everyone on their target list simultaneously, making it impossible for survivors to organize effective resistance. Webb whistled softly. That's not just assassination. That's systematic purging of political opposition. Foster looked nauseated. The biological weapon technology could definitely support that scale of operation. They would just need to deploy different targeting vectors in each city. Lou was already thinking about the implications for their mission. We can't just stop the San Francisco operation. We need to expose the entire network before they can execute any part of Final Protocol. Sarah realized that their operation had evolved far beyond what any of them had originally planned. They were no longer trying to prevent a single attack. They were trying to prevent the systematic destruction of democratic oversight in America. 6 weeks, she said quietly. We have 6 weeks to gather enough evidence to expose the largest intelligence conspiracy in American history. Elena looked around at their small team. For people with limited resources, facing an organization with virtually unlimited government backing and sophisticated operational capabilities. Can we actually do this? Webb's expression was determined. We don't have a choice. If we fail, democracy in America effectively ends. Final Protocol isn't just about eliminating current threats. It's about creating a permanent surveillance state where dissent becomes impossible. Sarah stared at her countersignal device, the technology that had started as a simple defensive measure and had evolved into their primary weapon against ShadowNet. The warning Elena had given her about the signal had been accurate, but neither of them had understood the full scope of what they would discover. Now they knew. The signal was just the beginning. The real battle was for the future of American democracy itself. The Biosecure Solutions facility looked like any other pharmaceutical research complex from the outside, with modern glass buildings surrounded by landscape parking areas and discrete security checkpoints. But Sarah Chin knew that beneath this ordinary facade lay one of the most dangerous biological weapons laboratories in the world. She sat in a rented van parked half a mile from the facility, monitoring ShadowNet communications while Marcus Webb prepared for the most dangerous infiltration of his career. For weeks remained until Final Protocol's scheduled deployment, and their team had spent the past 2 weeks gathering intelligence and refining their operational plan. Dr. Amanda Foster had provided detailed analysis of the biological weapon's technical specifications. Jennifer Liu had prepared comprehensive media packages ready for immediate release. Elena Vasquez coordinated their security protocols and maintained contact with backup assets Webb had recruited from his network of former intelligence operatives. But tonight, everything depended on Webb's ability to penetrate Biosecure Solutions security systems and access the underground laboratories where ShadowNet stored their biological weapons. Sarah's countersignal system would provide real-time intelligence about security alerts and guard movements, but once Webb entered the facility, he would be essentially on his own. Security shift change completed. Sarah reported through her encrypted communication headset. Night shift personnel are 40% reduced from normal levels. Guard rotations are running 12 minutes behind schedule due to equipment maintenance delays. Webb nodded, checking his equipment one final time. He wore a Biosecure Solutions maintenance uniform that Foster had obtained through her contacts in the pharmaceutical research community. Hidden in his tool bag were sophisticated electronic devices capable of bypassing the facility's biometric security systems. I'm reading elevated communication traffic on ShadowNet channels, Sarah continued. But it appears to be related to operations in other cities. No specific alerts about your target facility. Webb had spent years planning operations like this during his CIA career, but he had never attempted to infiltrate a facility while being hunted by his former colleagues. Every aspect of tonight's mission carried risks that could result in immediate execution if he was discovered. Elena's voice came through their communication system from her position monitoring local police frequencies. Emergency services are handling a multi-vehicle accident on Highway 101. Response times to your area are increased by at least 15 minutes. Webb smiled grimly. Sometimes operational success depended on lucky timing as much as careful planning. He shouldered his tool bag and began walking toward Biosecure Solutions' employee entrance. Sarah watched Webb's progress through multiple sources of intelligence. Her counter-signal system intercepted routine security communications from the facility, while hidden cameras Webb had placed during previous surveillance missions provided visual confirmation of guard movements. Most importantly, she maintained real-time access to ShadowNet's communication networks, giving her advance warning of any changes in their security protocols. First checkpoint approaching, Webb reported softly. 2 guards visible. Standard verification procedures in progress. Sarah monitored the facility's employee database in real time, confirming that Webb's false identity would pass routine security checks. The maintenance worker whose credentials Webb was using was legitimately scheduled to work tonight, but Foster had arranged for the real employee to call in sick at the last minute. Verification complete. Access granted to general facility areas, Webb reported. Proceeding to elevator access for sub-level laboratories. This was where their mission became significantly more dangerous. The underground laboratories required additional security clearances that were much harder to fake. Webb would need to use electronic devices that could trigger security alarms if they were detected. Sarah's monitoring equipment suddenly detected new activity on ShadowNet communication channels. "Wait," she said urgently. "I'm seeing increased message traffic from facility security. Someone may have noticed irregular patterns in tonight's shift assignments." Webb paused in a maintenance corridor, listening for sounds that might indicate security alerts. Specific threats or general concerns? Sarah decoded the intercepted messages, her heart racing as she realized what she was reading. General security review initiated. They're conducting random verification checks on all personnel working tonight. You need to reach the laboratory level before they get to your sector. Webb abandoned his careful pace and moved quickly through the facility corridors, using service passages and maintenance routes that normal employees wouldn't access. His CIA training had taught him to operate under pressure, but tonight's mission carried personal stakes that made concentration difficult. Elevator access secured, Webb reported. Descending to sublevel 3. Sarah monitored facility schematics, tracking Webb's progress toward the biological weapons storage area. According to Foster's intelligence, the weapons were stored in a secure laboratory designated as Research Division 7, which officially didn't exist in any public documentation. But as Webb reached the underground laboratory level, Sarah detected alarming changes in ShadowNet communication patterns. Instead of routine operational updates, she was reading emergency protocols that suggested major security concerns. "Emergency alert from ShadowNet Command," Sarah reported urgently. Multiple references to asset protection and facility security enhancement. They may know about tonight's operation. Webb had reached Research Division 7, but the laboratory's security systems were more sophisticated than they had anticipated. Instead of simple biometric scanners, the entrance required multi-factor authentication, including retinal scans, voice recognition, and what appeared to be some kind of genetic verification system. "I need more time to bypass these security systems," Webb said. "Current electronic countermeasures aren't sufficient for genetic-level authentication." Sarah's monitoring equipment detected immediate threats that made delay impossible. Multiple security teams are being deployed to your floor. You have less than 3 minutes before they reach your position. Webb made a decision that violated every security protocol he had learned during his intelligence career. Instead of attempting to bypass the laboratory's sophisticated security systems, he used explosive charges to breach the laboratory door directly. The explosion was small and shaped to minimize structural damage, but it triggered immediate alarms throughout the Biosecure Solutions facility. Webb had perhaps 10 minutes before security teams would surround the laboratory and eliminate any possibility of escape. "I'm inside Research Division 7, Webb reported as he entered the biological weapons laboratory. But facility-wide security alerts are now active. Extraction will be extremely difficult. Sarah watched through her monitoring systems as biosecure solution security teams mobilized throughout the facility. But what worried her more was the rapid increase in ShadowNet communication traffic. Someone with high-level authority was coordinating responses to tonight's infiltration. Webb, you need to know that this isn't just facility security responding to your presence. ShadowNet Command is treating tonight as a major security breach. They're deploying resources beyond normal protocols. Inside Research Division 7, Webb found biological weapon storage that exceeded their most serious estimates. Instead of experimental samples for final protocol, he discovered production-scale quantities of biological agents designed to target dozens of different genetic profiles. Sarah, I'm looking at industrial-scale biological weapons production. This isn't research. This is manufacturing for immediate deployment. Webb used specialized recording equipment to document the laboratory's contents while simultaneously downloading data from connected computer systems. Sarah felt sick as she monitored Webb's discoveries. Final protocol wasn't scheduled to begin in 4 weeks. It was ready to deploy immediately, waiting only for optimal targeting opportunities. But Webb's most disturbing discovery came when he accessed the laboratory's production records. ShadowNet hadn't just developed biological weapons targeting their known enemies. They had created weapons designed to target entire demographic groups, potentially eliminating millions of people who shared specific genetic characteristics. Sarah, they have weapons targeting ethnic populations, geographic regions, even political affiliations that correlate with genetic markers. This goes far beyond individual assassinations. They're planning genocide on a scale that would make historical atrocities look small. Sarah's hands shook as she processed the implications of Webb's discovery. ShadowNet wasn't just planning to eliminate political opposition. They were planning to reshape American society by systematically eliminating demographic groups they considered undesirable. Get out of there now, Sarah said urgently. I don't care what else you might find. We have enough evidence to expose everything, but only if you survive to deliver it. Webb began his extraction procedures, but facility security had already surrounded the laboratory level. Through her monitoring systems, Sarah watched as multiple teams of heavily armed guards took positions outside Research Division 7. Multiple security teams on your floor, Sarah reported. Standard exit routes are compromised. You need alternative extraction methods. Webb had planned for this possibility. During his surveillance missions, he had identified service tunnels that connected the laboratory level to underground utility systems. The tunnels weren't shown on any facility maps, but they provided potential escape routes for emergencies. Accessing utility tunnel system, Webb reported as he used explosive charges to breach a wall panel. Estimated travel time to external access point is 8 minutes. Sarah monitored ShadowNet communications as Webb began his underground escape. What she discovered made her realize that tonight's mission had exposed their entire operation to immediate retaliation. ShadowNet knows about our team, Sarah announced to Elena and their other team members. They're analyzing tonight's infiltration and connecting it to previous intelligence breaches. They know we're alive, and they know we've been monitoring their communications. Elena's response was immediate and decisive. Emergency extraction protocols for all team members. Everyone disappear immediately and follow backup communication procedures. Dr. Foster and Jennifer Liu, who had been monitoring the mission from separate locations, received emergency alerts to abandon their positions and activate preset escape plans. Within minutes, their entire team was scattering across the San Francisco Bay Area, hoping to evade ShadowNet's inevitable retaliation. But Webb was still trapped in Biosecure Solutions' utility tunnels, carrying evidence that could expose final protocol, but pursued by security teams who had authorization to kill intruders on site. Utility tunnel systems are more complex than anticipated, Webb reported through increasingly static-filled communications. Underground signal interference is limiting my navigation capabilities. Sarah realized that Webb needed guidance that only she could provide by monitoring the facility's infrastructure systems in real time. But Providing that guidance would require her to maintain communication links that ShadowNet could potentially trace. I can guide you through the tunnel systems, Sarah told Webb. But sustained communication will expose my location to ShadowNet tracking systems. Webb's response was immediate. Do it. The evidence I'm carrying is more important than any individual survival. Sarah began providing detailed navigation instructions while simultaneously monitoring ShadowNet's efforts to trace her communication signals. She guided Webb through underground utility corridors, around security checkpoints, and toward external access points that would allow him to escape biosecure solutions completely. But as Webb neared the facility's perimeter, Sarah detected new threats that made extraction even more dangerous. ShadowNet hadn't just mobilized facility security. They had deployed federal law enforcement resources, claiming that terrorists were attempting to steal biological weapons from a legitimate pharmaceutical research facility. Local police, FBI, and hazmat teams are surrounding the entire facility, Sarah reported. They're treating this as a biological terrorism incident. Standard extraction points are compromised. Webb was now trapped between biosecure solution security teams searching the underground tunnels and federal agents surrounding the facility's exterior. His only chance of escape required abandoning his planned extraction route and improvising alternatives based on real-time intelligence. Sarah, I need you to access the facility's environmental systems. If I can trigger building-wide emergencies, it might create enough chaos to mask my escape. Sarah penetrated Biosecure Solutions' environmental control systems, discovering capabilities she hadn't anticipated. The facility's sophisticated laboratory environments were controlled by automated systems that could simulate various emergency conditions for training purposes. I can trigger fire suppression systems, biological containment protocols, and evacuation procedures, Sarah reported. But activation will cause facility-wide chaos that might harm innocent employees. Webb considered the moral implications for approximately 3 seconds. Activate everything. We're trying to prevent genocide. Facility disruption is acceptable if it saves millions of lives. Sarah triggered every emergency protocol available through Biosecure Solutions' environmental control systems. Fire suppression systems activated throughout the building, filling corridors with chemical suppressants. Biological containment protocols sealed laboratory sections and activated decontamination procedures. Evacuation alarms sent hundreds of employees rushing toward emergency exits. The chaos was immediate and overwhelming. Federal agents outside the facility found themselves managing mass evacuations instead of maintaining perimeter security. Security teams inside the facility were forced to respond to multiple emergency situations instead of pursuing Webb through utility tunnels. Emergency systems activation successful, Sarah reported. Facility security is overwhelmed. External perimeter has gaps in coverage during evacuation procedures. Webb used the chaos to reach an emergency exit that connected to underground storm drainage systems. From there, he could travel through municipal utility tunnels to extraction points miles away from Biosecure Solutions. But his escape came at a cost that none of them had anticipated. Sarah's prolonged communication with Webb had allowed ShadowNet to triangulate her location. As Webb reached safety, Sarah discovered that she was now being hunted by assets who knew exactly where to find her. Elena, Sarah said urgently through their encrypted communication system. They've traced my location. Multiple teams are converging on my position. You need to coordinate team extraction without me. Elena's response was firm. Negative. We extract together or not at all. Sarah looked at her counter-signal device, the technology that had made their entire operation possible. She could take it with her and risk ShadowNet capturing their primary intelligence asset, or she could destroy it and eliminate their ability to monitor final protocols' final preparations. The counter-signal system is too important to risk, Sarah told Elena. If they capture it, they'll know everything we've discovered and everyone we've contacted. I have to destroy it. Elena understood immediately. How long do you need? Sarah began emergency data deletion procedures while monitoring approaching ShadowNet teams. 2 minutes to complete secure data destruction. 3 minutes to reach extraction point. But as Sarah worked to protect their intelligence capabilities, Webb's voice came through their communication system with news that changed everything. The biological weapons I documented aren't just for final protocol. They found our investigation. They're accelerating deployment to tomorrow night. Sarah stopped her data deletion procedures. If final protocol was being deployed in less than 24 hours, they needed the counter-signal system to monitor ShadowNet's final preparations. The risk of capture was less important than the certainty of mass murder if they couldn't coordinate countermeasures. Change of plans, Sarah announced. We're keeping the counter-signal system active. Whatever happens to me, you need this technology to stop final protocol. Elena's response was immediate and decisive. We're coming to get you. Maintain position and defend yourself until we arrive. Sarah looked around the internet cafe where she had been operating, realizing that she was about to experience combat for the first time in her life. She was a computer analyst, not a soldier. But the evidence Webb had gathered from Biosecure Solutions proved that millions of lives depended on their mission success. As ShadowNet teams approached her position, Sarah began preparing defenses using the only weapons she understood: electronic warfare and information technology. If she was in a fight, she would fight with the tools she knew best. The signal Elena had warned her about had led to this moment. Sarah Chun, cybersecurity analyst, was about to become Sarah Chun, electronic warfare specialist, in a battle that would determine the future of American democracy. Sarah Chun had 17 minutes before ShadowNet's assault teams reached her position at the Internet Cafe. She could see them through the counter-signal system's monitoring network, moving through Portland's downtown streets with military precision. But instead of panicking, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. She had spent months learning to think like ShadowNet operatives, and now she would use their own methods against them. Her laptop screen displayed a real-time tactical situation that most people would find overwhelming. 6 ShadowNet teams were converging on her location from different directions, coordinating through encrypted communications that Sarah could intercept and decode. Federal agents were establishing perimeter positions around a 4-block area, believing they were pursuing terrorists who had attacked a biological research facility. Local police were responding to multiple false emergency calls that ShadowNet had generated to create chaos and confusion. But Sarah had advantages that ShadowNet didn't know about. Elena Vasquez was 20 minutes away with a rescue team of former intelligence operatives that Marcus Webb had recruited. Dr. Amanda Foster was analyzing the biological weapons data Webb had extracted from Biosecure Solutions, looking for countermeasures that could neutralize final protocol. Most importantly, Jennifer Liu was preparing to publish their evidence regardless of whether any of them survived the next hour. Sarah began her defense by turning the Internet Cafe into an electronic warfare command center. She connected her counter-signal device to the cafe's wireless network, using the connection to access municipal infrastructure systems throughout Portland. Traffic control systems, emergency communication networks, and building security systems all became potential weapons in her electronic arsenal. Elena, I'm reading 6 teams with approximately 4 operatives each, Sarah reported through their encrypted communication system. They're using standard urban assault patterns, but they don't know I can monitor their coordination communications. Elena's response was tense. Can you delay them until we reach your position? Sarah studied the approaching teams, analyzing their movement patterns and communication protocols. She had spent months learning to think like ShadowNet operatives, and now she understood their tactical assumptions. They expected her to run or hide, not to fight back using their own communication networks against them. I can do better than delay them, Sarah said. I can turn their coordination system into chaos. Sarah began implementing the most sophisticated electronic warfare operation of her career. Using ShadowNet's own communication protocols, she started injecting false intelligence into their tactical coordination network. Each approaching team began receiving contradictory information about target locations, team positions, and threat assessments. Team Alpha, target confirmed on third floor of target building. Proceed with standard clearing procedures. Command to Team Bravo. Alpha team reports no target on third floor. Redirect to basement level. Team Charlie to command. Building evacuation in progress. Multiple civilians exiting target building. All teams hold position. Contradictory intelligence requires verification before proceeding. Through her monitoring systems, Sarah watched as ShadowNet's carefully coordinated assault began to fall apart. Teams that had been moving with military precision suddenly became cautious and confused, uncertain about basic tactical information they had trusted completely. But Sarah's masterpiece was yet to come. She discovered that ShadowNet's communication network wasn't just coordinating tonight's operation. It was simultaneously managing final protocol preparations in 5 cities across the United States. By injecting chaos into their Portland operation, she was disrupting their entire national network. Webb, are you monitoring ShadowNet communications? Sarah asked through their encrypted system. Confirmed. I'm seeing coordination breakdowns in multiple cities. Whatever you're doing is having system-wide effects. Sarah smiled as she realized the full scope of her capabilities. The counter-signal system she had built to monitor ShadowNet was powerful enough to completely paralyze their operations. Every false order she sent, every piece of contradictory intelligence she injected, rippled through their network and affected operations hundreds of miles away. But as Sarah worked to disrupt ShadowNet's coordination, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Final protocol wasn't just being accelerated. It was already in motion. Biological weapons are being deployed simultaneously in Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Elena, final protocol is active now. I'm reading deployment confirmations from all target cities. They started the operation 3 hours ago. Elena's response was immediate and decisive. Foster, what do we need to stop biological weapon deployment that's already in progress? Foster's voice came through their communication system with information that offered both hope and terror. The biological agents require 12 to 18 hours to become fully active in targeted individuals. If we can identify deployment vectors and warn potential victims, we might be able to initiate countermeasures. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the implications. Somewhere in 5 major cities, hundreds of people were being exposed to biological weapons that would kill them within the next 18 hours. The only way to save them was to identify exactly how ShadowNet was deploying the weapons and warn potential victims before the agents became lethal. I need access to ShadowNet's operational deployment data, Sarah announced. Not just their communication coordination, but their actual mission files with target lists and deployment methods. Webb's response was grim. That level of access requires penetrating their core database systems, not just their communication networks. The security protocols are beyond anything we've attempted. Sarah looked at her counter-signal device, understanding that she was about to attempt the most dangerous hacking operation in history. ShadowNet's core databases contained not just final protocol details, but the complete records of their entire organization. If she could access those systems, she would have evidence to expose everyone involved in the conspiracy. But attempting to penetrate their core security would also alert them to her exact location and capabilities. I'm going to try, Sarah announced. But once I start this penetration attempt, they'll know exactly where I am and exactly what I'm doing. There will be no more hiding. Elena's response was immediate. How long do you need? Sarah studied the database architecture she could detect through ShadowNet's communication networks. Their core systems were protected by multiple layers of encryption and authentication, but she had already demonstrated the ability to spoof their communication protocols. The same techniques might work on their database security. Minimum 30 minutes for basic access, 60 minutes for comprehensive data extraction, 2 hours for complete system penetration that would give us everything they've ever done. Elena checked her watch. We'll be at your position in 15 minutes. After that, We could provide security while you work. But Sarah realized that Elena's rescue team would be walking into a trap. ShadowNet wasn't just sending assault teams to capture her. They were setting up a complex ambush designed to eliminate her entire team simultaneously. Elena, you can't come here. They're not just hunting me. They're using me as bait to draw in everyone else. I'm reading communications about prepared ambush positions around this entire area. Elena's response revealed the determination that had driven her to expose ShadowNet for 3 years. Then, we changed the plan. Instead of rescuing you, we make this location our final battle position. We fight them here, and we win or lose everything together. Sarah felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration as she realized what Elena was proposing. Instead of running from ShadowNet, they would make their stand in a downtown Portland internet cafe, fighting for the survival of American democracy with nothing but laptops and determination. Webb, Foster, Lou, Elena continued. Emergency convergence on Sarah's position. Bring everything we have. This is our final operation. Over the next 10 minutes, Sarah prepared the internet cafe for electronic warfare while her teammates converged on her position. She connected her systems to every available network and electronic device in the surrounding area, creating a digital fortress capable of controlling traffic systems, building security, emergency communications, and municipal infrastructure. But most importantly, she began her assault on ShadowNet's core database systems. Using techniques she had developed to spoof their communication protocols, Sarah started penetrating the most secure computer systems in the American intelligence community. Initial security layers bypassed, Sarah reported, as her teammates took positions around the cafe. Accessing operational databases now. What Sarah found in ShadowNet's operational databases exceeded their worst fears about Final Protocol. The biological weapons weren't just targeting hundreds of people. They were designed to eliminate over 10,000 Americans who had been classified as threats to unlimited surveillance power. They have detailed files on everyone who has ever opposed government surveillance programs, Sarah announced. Senators, judges, technology executives, journalists, civil rights lawyers, privacy advocates. Anyone who has ever questioned intelligence agency overreach is on their target list. Elena looked at the data Sarah was extracting, recognizing names from across the political spectrum. This isn't about partisan politics. They're targeting anyone who believes in constitutional limits on government power. But Sarah's most shocking discovery came when she accessed ShadowNet's organizational charts. The conspiracy wasn't limited to a few rogue operatives. It included senior officials from multiple intelligence agencies, defense contractors with billions in government contracts, and elected officials who had been secretly collaborating to eliminate democratic oversight. Elena, ShadowNet goes all the way to the top of the intelligence community, Sarah said, her voice shaking as she read through organizational documents. The CIA director, the deputy director of the NSA, senior officials at the FBI. This isn't a rogue operation. This is a coordinated effort by the highest levels of the intelligence community. Webb cursed softly as he processed the implications. If senior intelligence officials are involved, then normal law enforcement won't be able to stop them. They control too much of the system. Foster had been analyzing the biological weapons deployment data Sarah was extracting, but we can still stop Final Protocol. I've identified the deployment vectors. They're using routine medical procedures, workplace health screenings, and conference attendance to expose targets to biological agents. Lou was already working on publication plans that would expose everything simultaneously. I have media contacts in multiple countries. If we can get this evidence to international journalists, they won't be able to suppress the story domestically. Sarah continued penetrating ShadowNet's databases while monitoring the assault teams approaching their position. She had discovered deployment schedules that allowed her to warn specific targets about their imminent exposure to biological weapons. I can identify people who are going to be targeted in the next few hours, Sarah announced. If we can warn them and provide countermeasures, we might be able to save hundreds of lives. But as Sarah worked to extract life-saving information, ShadowNet's assault teams reached the Internet Cafe. The building was suddenly surrounded by operatives who had authorization to use lethal force to prevent their evidence from being exposed. Multiple teams surrounding building. Webb reported from his position near the cafe's entrance. Standard urban assault configuration. They're preparing for final approach. Elena checked her weapon and took position near a window that provided views of the street. "How much more time do you need, Sarah?" Sarah looked at her screens, watching as gigabytes of classified information downloaded to her encrypted storage devices. She was extracting evidence that could expose the largest intelligence conspiracy in American history, but she needed at least 20 more minutes to complete the data transfer. 20 minutes for complete database extraction. But I can get the biological weapons countermeasures in 5 minutes if that's all the time we have. Elena made a command decision that would determine whether millions of Americans lived or died. Take the 20 minutes. We'll hold them off. The next 20 minutes would determine the future of American democracy. Either Sarah would complete her data extraction and expose ShadowNet completely, or they would all die trying to prevent the systematic elimination of constitutional government. ShadowNet's assault began at exactly 11:47 p.m. Pacific Time. Armed operatives breached the Internet Cafe from multiple directions, using flashbang grenades and smoke canisters to disorient defenders. But Elena's team was prepared for urban combat, and the cafe's layout provided defensive advantages that military planners hadn't anticipated. Webb positioned himself to control the main entrance, using furniture and equipment to create defensive barriers. Elena took the rear entrance, where service corridors provided both threats and opportunities for tactical advantage. Foster and Lou maintained communication systems, while Sarah continued her database penetration. But the real battle was being fought in cyberspace, where Sarah was racing against ShadowNet's efforts to shut down her access to their core systems. As she downloaded classified files, ShadowNet cybersecurity teams were implementing countermeasures designed to protect their most sensitive information. "They're trying to cut my access," Sarah reported as she worked frantically to complete her data extraction. "I need to accelerate the download process, but that will make it easier for them to trace and block." Elena's response came between bursts of gunfire. "Do whatever you have to do. We'll buy you the time you need." Sarah made the decision to abandon stealth and use every available computational resource to extract ShadowNet's complete database. She connected to municipal networks, commandeered processing power from nearby businesses, and activated backup systems that would expose her activities but maximize her download speed. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Sarah's data extraction accelerated exponentially, but it also triggered every security system in ShadowNet's network. Within minutes, cybersecurity teams across the country were working to stop her penetration of their most classified systems. "Sarah," Webb called out during a brief pause in the fighting, "whatever you're doing is working. I'm monitoring their communications, and they're panicking about information security breaches." Sarah smiled grimly as she watched classified files streaming onto her storage devices. She was downloading organizational charts, operational plans, financial records, target lists, and biological weapon specifications that would expose every aspect of ShadowNet's conspiracy. But, most importantly, she was extracting the countermeasures that Foster needed to neutralize Final Protocol's biological weapons. "Foster, I have the complete biological weapon specifications," Sarah announced, "including antidotes and neutralization procedures." Foster immediately began analyzing the technical data, while Elena and Webb continued defending their position. What she discovered offered hope that Final Protocol could still be stopped. "The biological weapons have specific neutralization protocols," Foster announced. "Medical countermeasures that can prevent lethality if administered within 18 hours of exposure. I can prepare antidotes that will save most of the targeted victims." Lou was already coordinating with international media contacts, preparing to publish their evidence simultaneously across multiple countries. "I have confirmation from journalists in the UK, Canada, Germany, and Japan. They're ready to publish everything as soon as we transmit the complete files. Sarah's data extraction reached 90% completion when ShadowNet's assault teams made their final push into the internet cafe. The fighting became intense and desperate, with Elena and Webb struggling to maintain defensive positions against overwhelming numbers of attackers. "Sarah, how much more time?" Elena called out as she reloaded her weapon. 3 minutes for complete extraction. 2 minutes for essential files only. Elena made another command decision that would determine their mission's success. Instead of trying to hold their position for 3 more minutes, she ordered a fighting withdrawal that would buy Sarah the 2 minutes she needed while beginning their escape procedures. 2 minutes, then we move. Everyone prepare for emergency extraction. Sarah focused completely on her remaining download tasks, extracting the most critical files while preparing to abandon the rest. In 90 seconds, she had enough evidence to expose ShadowNet completely and enough technical data to save thousands of lives. But as Sarah completed her data extraction, she realized that their mission had evolved beyond anything they had originally planned. They weren't just exposing a conspiracy. They were preventing the end of democratic government in America. "Download complete," Sarah announced as she disconnected her systems and prepared to run. "We have everything we need." Elena coordinated their withdrawal from the internet cafe, using smoke grenades and electronic warfare to confuse ShadowNet's assault teams. Sarah carried her counter-signal device and encrypted storage drives while her teammates provided security during their escape. But their escape was complicated by the realization that ShadowNet had surrounded a much larger area than they had anticipated. Federal agents, local police, and ShadowNet operatives had established a perimeter that covered dozens of city blocks. "Webb, what are our extraction options?" Elena asked as they moved through Portland's downtown streets. Webb consulted maps and intelligence updates from his network of contacts. Multiple options, but all require getting past federal agents who think we're biological terrorists. Sarah suddenly realized that her counter-signal device offered them an escape option that no one else had considered. She could use ShadowNet's own communication networks to coordinate their extraction while simultaneously calling off the federal response. "I can use ShadowNet's communication system to create official orders canceling the federal response," Sarah explained. "If I make it appear that the terrorist threat was a false alarm, most of the law enforcement presence will withdraw." Elena looked skeptical. "Can you spoof federal law enforcement communications?" Sarah smiled as she explained her plan. "I don't need to spoof federal communications. I need to spoof ShadowNet communications reporting that the terrorist threat was eliminated. Federal agents will receive stand-down orders from their own command structure." Over the next 30 minutes, Sarah orchestrated one of the most sophisticated deception operations in the history of electronic warfare. Using ShadowNet's compromised communication networks, she generated reports claiming that the terrorist threat at Biosecure Solutions had been eliminated and that all suspects were in custody. Federal agents received official orders to withdraw from Portland, believing that ShadowNet operatives had successfully resolved the biological terrorism incident. Local police received updates indicating that federal authorities were handling the situation and that local support was no longer needed. Most importantly, Sarah generated reports claiming that the internet cafe incident was unrelated to the biological terrorism threat, describing it instead as a routine law enforcement operation targeting computer fraud suspects. The deception was so complete that within 1 hour, Sarah and her team were able to move freely through Portland, while ShadowNet's assault teams found themselves operating without federal backup and with minimal local police support. But their most important work happened after they reached safety. Foster immediately began preparing biological weapons countermeasures using the technical specifications Sarah had extracted from ShadowNet's databases. Lou coordinated with international journalists to publish their evidence simultaneously across multiple countries. Elena established secure communication with other intelligence professionals who could verify and act on their discoveries. Webb coordinated the most complex intelligence distribution operation of his career, ensuring that their evidence reached law enforcement officials, elected representatives, and military leaders who weren't compromised by ShadowNet's conspiracy. The final phase of their operation began at 6 a.m. Pacific Time, when Jennifer Liu's story was published simultaneously in major newspapers across 6 countries. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Classified documents, organizational charts, financial records, biological weapons specifications, and target lists that exposed the complete scope of ShadowNet's conspiracy. Foster's biological weapons countermeasures were distributed to medical facilities in 5 cities, providing antidotes that saved over 8,000 people who had been exposed to Final Protocol's biological agents. Emergency medical alerts were broadcast nationally, warning potential targets about biological weapons exposure and directing them to facilities where countermeasures were available. But the most significant impact came when senior military leaders and federal law enforcement officials reviewed Sarah's evidence and realized the scope of ShadowNet's penetration of the intelligence community. Within 12 hours, mass arrests began as loyal government officials moved to eliminate the conspiracy that had threatened to destroy American democracy. Elena Vasquez was vindicated after 3 years of hiding and running. Marcus Webb was restored to his position in the intelligence community with full honors. Dr. Amanda Foster returned to her research with new responsibilities for developing countermeasures against biological weapons. Jennifer Liu won every major journalism award for her coverage of the most important story of her lifetime. But Sarah Chin's life changed in ways she could never have anticipated when she first received Elena's warning about the signal. She became the most sought-after cybersecurity expert in the world, hired by governments and corporations to build defenses against electronic warfare and surveillance overreach. More importantly, she became the person who proved that democratic societies could defend themselves against sophisticated technological threats when citizens had the courage to fight back. The signal Elena had warned her about had indeed been dangerous. But Sarah's counter-signal had been perfect. She had responded with exactly the right combination of technical skill, moral courage, and determination to expose and defeat one of the most sophisticated conspiracies in American history. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a congressional committee investigating intelligence community overreach, holding the same counter-signal device that had started her journey from security analyst to national hero. When senators asked how she had found the courage to take on such powerful enemies, her answer was simple. Someone warned me about a signal. I built a better signal in response. And sometimes that's all democracy needs to survive.